Step into the ethereal realm of Paranormal M. Let us guide you through an array of paranormal wonders and supernatural phenomena. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with our latest extraordinary stories. Get ready to be enchanted and amazed. 3 knocks and a lady repeatedly screaming. I woke up and heard a lady on the streets just yelling, "Please help me," on repeat. I'm around on the 12th floor, so the sound was coming from down the streets. Initially, I didn't think much of it, but from the moment I woke up, I already felt something wasn't right. And within 5 seconds of me getting up, I heard 3 knocks on my wall. That sent chills down my spine. At that point, I got scared and knew something is definitely not right with this. My thought process was, I do want to help the lady, but I feel this is more of an invitation call. If I were to go to my balcony and look, I feel like I might accidentally fall for a spiritual trap. But then what if she did need help? Am I a bad scaredy cat and just ignoring a person in need? So I just waited and listened. She didn't say anything else, just repeat and repeat, "Please help me." Another thought I have is maybe she really needs help and there are several condos with security guards in the lobby looking out. She'd be able to speak to any one of them to call police. I know she's not in any danger because if she was in danger of getting attacked, she would be entering any one of the condos to hide and get security to help her quick. The most interesting thing would be, which reinforced my thought of it being paranormal, besides the 3 knocks, was that when I stopped focusing on the screaming, I can hear the screams as a cat's meowing. At that point, I just prayed for protection. I went on Google for the Lord's Prayer and YouTube for other prayers, asking God and Jesus to protect my space and my soul. That made me feel better, but the screams were still going. After 10 or 15 minutes, her screams faded away. So I just went back to sleep. I know a lot of people will think that they wouldn't be able to go back to sleep after that, but for me, I can, because this is not the first time I've dealt with the paranormal. I used to need a nightlight or someone there to watch me sleep when I was a kid. But after seeing ghosts for the first time, then I was actually able to sleep without nightlight, which is kind of in reverse. I could go back to sleep because my faith is strong. Mind you, I was still scared though, but I experienced this type of evil shit before, and God and the Bible prayer did help me with that as well, so I felt it'll be fine this time as well. One last interesting thing for that night was my dream after. There was no ghosts or demons in the dream. It was just that I was in my condo, but with a lot of clutter. In the dream, I quickly realized that I wasn't a dream and I wanted to wake up, but I couldn't. I had to put a lot of focus and energy to wake back up. It was around 4:30 a.m. at that point. From my Chinese background, I know when someone calls your name at night to not answer it. Also, from other Western paranormal shows and stories, I understand that the 3 knocks are a request to enter your spiritual space. I don't know what I did to even cause this to happen. I wasn't watching horror or doing some witchy shit or Ouija boards. I wasn't even thinking about the paranormal. The only thing I can think of for this to happen is my mom's in China right now, and she loves to go to spiritualists and temples and get readings and talismans. Hope she's not the one causing this, but I will ask her what she did when I get back, what she was doing exactly on November the 15th through the 16th. Anyone have experience with something like this? I'm a 41-year-old man, so it's been going on for a while. It started initially with me seeing the same girl in my dreams. I could remember 6 or 7 dreams off the top of my head as a boy with her in them. She doesn't speak much in them. In some, she's completely silent. Around the time these dreams started, I was going into puberty, of course. I'd also wake up at night hearing a woman's voice calling my name out of the backyard. Not my mother. I knew she was asleep, and her accent was too easy to notice. The problem is, one night my brother woke up when I was 13. Said he heard a woman calling my name as well. Said it freaked him out. He was like 10 or so at the time. By the time I was 15 or 16, the dreams still happened from time to time. But I also began to have dreams of a full moon watching me like a great eye. I'd always feel like I was being watched. I moon-gazed at night. And I oddly felt like it was a woman watching me. This feeling still persists to this day, though not as often or as strongly. But I haven't been able to have one successful romantic relationship. I saw this woman for 7 years in my 20s and 30s, but it ended badly. She was also mentally and emotionally abusive, so that left their own scars behind to deal with. I always feel like my relationships or attempts at relationships are under some sort of dark cloud. I even had a friend who does palm readings give me a reading. She said I have a great knack for success in work and making money, which has been true. But she saw only failure in regards to personal relationships and friendships. And to this day, I'm 41 and single, with very few friends as well. I do well putting up the appearance of having everything and being successful, but inside I feel lonely. Sometimes late at night, I feel longing for the girl from my dream, or for whatever I feel is near me sometimes. I've woken up in the middle of the night feeling a deep sense of loss or longing. I have always felt haunted. It's hard to explain, but I was a lonely child. When I was 6, my parents and I moved to a house in a rural state. As soon as we got there, I started experiencing odd things. I remember that during the first few weeks that we lived there, I had dreams of ghosts in our front yard. I had dreams around the same time of there being little bogs in our backyard and voices telling me to come toward it and being pulled underwater. I later had graphic dreams of death of loved ones. We moved in January of 1997. That same month, my father was hospitalized with pneumonia. The following month, my mother took an overdose, ended up being comatose and on a ventilator, nearly died. In April or May, my dog was killed, hit by a car on the road. We got a bird who happened to be born on the day that my dog died, and a year later that bird was let loose by accident by a family friend, never to be seen again. I had night terrors. I noticed that a lot of our worst traits as a family or people were heightened while living there. Meanwhile, for example, if someone was mean, there were meaner ones there. Whatever their worst trait was heightened. People who knew around us died. Like I knew a girl local to us who died at 6 of leukemia. Another family friend died from kidney failure. I developed severe anxiety toward the end of our time there. That's remained. We moved there from 2001. I later heard that the former owner had a mentally ill son who was abusive, and that her husband died while living there. My mother became very sickly not long after living there and became progressively ill until she died in 2020. My father struggled more intensely than ever with substance abuse during and after being there. As I said, I struggle with anxiety. Since then, I've often felt haunted. I have anxiety. At night, I often feel I'm being watched by unseen eyes, the dead, that just around the corner of my bedroom await unseen dead things. That winter is the time of the dead when the dead draw most near and seek to add others to their numbers. Winter is snow, death, decay, isolation, and loss. Yet outside of a few indirect experiences, I've never beheld the image of a ghost. I've never seen a putrid monster. Sometimes I want to see these dark, dead creatures badly. To truly test my mettle, I have dreams of things that come to be. I have dreams of the past, but I've never truly seen a ghost, sadly. Men in Black Real Encounter. I attended a community center for children in Brooklyn, New York. I had to be no older than maybe 6 or 7. The center would take all the children on trips throughout the summer. So one of our trips was a place in Manhattan, similar to Discovery Zone or a Chuck E. Cheese, but even bigger. I never could quite remember the name of the establishment. I'm guessing, being that it was so long ago, along the walls were interactive tablets for children which had games and learning applications. My godbrother saw it, and he was glued there the entire time. There were ball pits and tubes as far as I could see. They looked like castles to me, 3 separate sections. One section seemed to be closed off. I assume, being that the lights were dim in this particular area. I followed a group of older kids to see what they were up to. And honestly, I had a crush on one of the girls, so I planned to let her know while we were there. Found her in a group of older kids at the top of one of those tub towers, making out. Making out it. Executive decision. Found her in a group of older kids at the top of one of the tub towers, making her way out of it. Okay, executive decision number 2. Found her with a group of older kids at the top of one of the tub towers making out. It had me really bummed, so I left out on my own and I decided to go to the section that's rather dim. And there were a huge padded hill at the bottom of the ball pit with a rope above it so you could slide across. I rolled my body down the ramp. When I looked upright, in the front of my face, a young boy laid face down, not moving at all. At his feet and at his head were 2 men dressed in all black suits, completely bald with black shades on. What scared me the most were how pale they were and how they looked exactly alike. All I know is I don't want to be the next kid that got, so I took off running, found my godbrother frantically trying to explain to him what I'd just seen. Before I could even get it out, they made an announcement on a loudspeaker. The next thing I know, my entire group had got kicked out of the place. They told the counselors we were rowdy, which was completely untrue. The counselors thought it was a race thing. I never did tell anybody, I guess out of fear, but keep in mind there was no Men in Black movies made yet, nor was the internet what it is today. Brutal punctuation. Moving on. Y'all are gonna tell me I'm crazy, but hear me out. I was at my ex's house, and we were all in the living room and kitchen area. It was an open floor plan, and our son, too, is sitting on his little toddler chair and table set, eating and watching TV. All of a sudden, he falls off of his chair. And he is too super clumsy, right? But he was all the way up on the chair for once in his life and wasn't doing anything that could have made him fall off. And the way he fell was so strange, it was like he slid off to the side of it. So my ex is asking if he's okay and chuckling. He had just smoked. He looks at me and says, "Looks like he got yeeted off the chair." And I just looked at him with my eyes wide because I thought I was just crazy and paranoid about ghosts. So I confirmed and told him that, no, really, it did look like he got pushed. I asked our son, "Did someone push you?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Who pushed you?" He walked out by his table and looked around and then pointed in the middle of the empty living room. Y'all, my jaw dropped and I tried to debunk it myself by even asking who. Because when he's messing with us, he'll say like, Mommy did it, or Daddy did it. I asked him again, and when I got up to stand next to him and he looked around, this time he was looking for it again like he couldn't find it, and then points to this empty spot between both of our sofas. So clearly I'm burning the house down, but does anybody have any similar experiences with kids? My grandmother's curse. My great-grandma, born in 1939 in Germany, swore this family was cursed until her passing. When she was around 12, her sister went missing on December 24th, though I don't have the exact year. Fast forward to her adulthood, she made her way to America, where our family has been ever since. Every year since, come Thanksgiving, weird things start happening to us. Lights flicker, TVs change channels, mysterious illnesses. In 2021, our 11-month-old puppy collapsed and died on Christmas Eve morning. 9:19 a.m. That number burnt into my memory with an inconclusive autopsy. I vividly remember my great-grandma, even in her wheelchair-bound last months, following us during Christmas gatherings. She was paranoid, fearing whatever haunted our family might claim another child. Family members are convinced it's a haunting, but I lean towards trauma. Thoughts? I'm open to answering questions. My storytelling might not be top-notch. I blame my ADHD for that. So I was curious, and I think I fucked around and found out. I was reminiscing about when my dad and I used to download ghost hunting apps and run around his apartment complex for ghosts. So I re-downloaded one today. It's just called Ghost Hunting Tools. It's an EMF reader and a spirit box, or supposedly is. Anyways, I had it open for about 15 minutes and the readings were relatively normal. Spewed out random words every couple of minutes. I noticed when it would spit out a word, the energy levels would spike a bit before, almost mimicking how I would imagine a spirit would draw energy. Like it would build up and EMF levels would go up and then down once the word was out. I figured it was fake, but kept it open in the background. I decided to try a pendulum game with the bracelet that I read about online. It said to ask out loud what side is yes and all that. Kind of felt it go to one side when I asked, so I confirmed with the question. Do you understand? And I felt it almost definitely start to move to the side that I assigned to yes. It was around this point I started to feel nervous. Something just wasn't right, and I read that if I were to feel this way, end the game immediately by saying goodbye. So I did. I turned around to my phone, which was still open with the app on my bed. The EMF reader was spiking at the highest level, I'm not joking. It was spitting out words within seconds of each other. And the entire time I had it open, it spit out only random words every couple of minutes. I got words like near, you, shoot, and Diablo. I immediately held up the pendulum again and I said sternly, I said goodbye. And the levels went down and the scary messages stopped. But I'm still scared. Face to face with a demon. So I'm a believer in the supernatural, and have been all my life. I've always had experiences to feeling like I'm being watched, having perplexing dreams of entities that felt too real, or feeling an energy that either was or wasn't happy. Now, this experience I'm going to talk about is by far the most intense and outstanding experience I've ever had, and I'd never had even dreamed of experiencing it. So I'll get into it. Back in spring of 2020 was an average night, as I was doing what I usually did, watching YouTube, scrolling through my phone as I wind down from the day and get ready for bed. Nothing out of the ordinary and no foreign or unsettling energies were present. Time goes by. Time for bed, get cozy, start getting sleepy. A couple minutes go by, give or take, and I'm starting to notice it getting cold, and I'm just like, a little chilly. It's that kind of cold. I'm talking freezing down to 0 degrees type cold, which never happens where I live, especially in the countryside during spring. Absolutely freezing. I was shaking and I could see my own breath and I could tell something was way off. I sit up and I'm instantly hit with an intense presence of a being in the corner of my room to the right of my bedroom door. Now my room isn't very big. I'd estimate like a 6 by 12. So if you were in here with me, it'd take less than one step to get to the other side. This thing, quote unquote, that I could feel is standing there just staring at me unmoving. As it took me in, I took it in. I could see this thing clear as day in my head, a perfect image as if they showed itself to me through my third eye, if you believe in any of that. And gods, it wasn't pretty. First, its skin was black as the void itself. No other colors were present. Its face was nothing but 2 hollowed-out holes and a black contorted skull. No other features but empty sockets. Its body and limbs were thin, malnourished to the fullest extent, being like twigs, along with its arms and legs being abnormally long. And this thing was standing at what I estimate to be about 8 feet. Despite this thing being a demon, it held no hostilities toward me. It just stood there looking until, after maybe 20 to 30 minutes pass, and it finally leaves. Temperature warms up. No more presence, and I'm alone once more. It didn't shake me up as much as it did astonish me, being so close to such an otherworldly being, let alone its center of attention. I know this is a fairly out there and extremely boggling experience, but if anybody else has had a similar experience, do let me know. It would be nice to know if I'm not the only one who's had something like this happen. Jinn encounter at a relative's house. As a Muslim, we believe that those entities that anyone encounters, such as a ghost or a poltergeist or an apparition, are all jinn. Some of them just like to scare people for the sake of pranking. Others are absolutely evil and might literally harm you, like scratching or even worse. With that said, a long time ago I was staying at a relative's house. He was my uncle. He had a wife and 2 kids. They had a decent house, nothing big. Now keep in mind that the apartment's on the ground floor. You might hear kids playing or yelling outside. They keep the window open quite often. Anyway, I was alone there. They had gone out to the mall with my mother, and I kind of didn't want to join them because it would have just been boring to join them. So I decided to stay and just play video games, and the night started fine. Some time passed. I started hearing some noises like kids talking. I brushed it off as I thought it could just be someone outside, as mentioned before. But I kept hearing it louder and louder. I went to check the window, but there wasn't a single soul outside. So I decided to shut the window and go back to my game. Some time passed and I started hearing children talking and yelling. This time it was a little louder, as if it was inside the house. I got startled and checked around only to find absolutely nothing. When I sat down again and went back to playing, the noises started. This time it was getting louder and louder. I had a headset back then and put it on. It was connected to the monitor so I could hear the game. The noises became so loud that even with the headset on, I could hear them. And mind you, I was terrified, and just like that, the noises stopped all of a sudden. I felt someone was pulling the back of my shirt up. I jumped like I've never jumped before and just ran out of the house. And from that day, I never went back to that house again. When I opened the door, I found my father outside the house, about to ring the door. He looked at my face and asked what was wrong. Told him the story. He didn't believe me. However, he told me not to bring that up to my relatives so I wouldn't be disrespectful when I see my mother. Told her the story, but the loom on her face I could tell she believed every word I said because later I found out that my relative used to do seances in his house, and even his wife and children used to experience stuff too. Needless to say, that was one of the most terrifying experiences I ever had in my life, and since then, I tried my best to never get scared of encounters like that again. I had other experiences after that, such as noises and taps and similar stuff. But I learned that if you pay them no mind and don't show fear, they leave you alone. So a long time ago, it was my father's great-grandfather's funeral, and me and my mother had gone to attend the funeral at the church. So basically, when you enter the church, the start of the church itself has a graveyard, which is like 50 years old. So as the funeral was done and everything, while we were leaving and walking over the path of old graves to exit, I saw something shiny at a grave. I went and I saw that it was a ring. I was very fond of wearing rings and chains, but my mother never used to let me wear any of those. So I secretly picked up that ring, put it into my pants pocket. Later, we went to the residence of a family for condolence and meeting them. So I don't know what happened, but something struck me to say that I picked a ring from the graveyard to my mother. So I said it to my mother, and I picked an unknown ring fallen at a graveyard. She got angry and immediately told me to throw it off. Yelled at me. I got scared and went out of the house to throw the ring. I threw the ring in the gutter, like I actually threw it in the gutter, and it gushed down the water, and then I entered the house and my mother said that you should never take anything back from a graveyard. With that, we all spent good family time. Then me and my mother came back home, so we get tired and shit, and I went to my room to change clothes, and I was checking my pockets. You know, like if I had any paper or handkerchief or so. But, as I put my hand in my right pocket of pant, I take my hand out and find the ring still with me. I was so shocked and scared, I stared to shiver. I remember like I had, for real, thrown that ring away on my own hands into the gutter. So how it's even possible for it to still be with me? But then I remember that the mother told never take anything back within yourself from a graveyard. I immediately put my clothes on, and without telling my mother about the situation, I run to my nearby church, placed the ring at the Mother Mary statue, and prayed there for 10 minutes. Got back home, and luckily this time the ring wasn't there. But honestly, I was so stressed that how on earth a thing which I had thrown away was still with me. Now, I know most of you would be like, oh, it's just your mind thinking that you might have thrown away the ring, but you might have kept it in the back pocket, but for real, I didn't. Some may believe, some may not, but it was very scary to my though. I didn't write that, but I am reading it. On to the next story. Anybody ever felt somebody had died before you even knew it? So last night I had a vision when I was in bed. As soon as I closed my eyes to go to sleep, I saw a limp hand sticking out of the gravel. My eyes shot open immediately. I don't know why, but I knew somebody had died. I went to check on the kids and hoped it was my imagination. Couldn't tell who it was, but I just felt it. Then this morning when I was on my way to work, I got a text telling me of an old friend who I used to hang around with, went to school with. They'd passed away last night. But we hadn't been close for a few years. I'd barely seen him for a long time. I'm so confused right now, like, how did that happen? I spoke with my partner about it, completely worried about judgments, and even thought about just keeping it to myself. She told me when her uncle died, they called his brother, but he already knew, despite him just being found in his home. He said he had dreamt about his brother coming to say goodbye. He already knew before they had. The whole thing was blown in my mind, to be honest. I've had similar things happen before, but I've always put it down to coincidence. But last night, I was so shocked. My head's actually pretty battered today. Woken up by a small floating light that retreated into my internet router. Last night I went down for bed around 3:30. I'm up that late on regular, and I usually stay down for a few solid hours, waking up for the bathroom and fall right back asleep until midday. I have a later work schedule, you could say. Half an hour later, I'm jolted awake by a flash of white light, right in my eyes. Immediately, the light shot up, flew across my ceiling, landed straight across the room on the router that sits directly ahead of me on my desk. If I had to guess, it was about 6 inches in diameter. Not exactly an orb, just floating light. Shapeless. In my remembering, 12 hours later, it was almost like the light was being cast by an object that I couldn't see. It was cast onto my ceiling and subsequently the wall that the router rests against. There was no form to the source that I could see. It was as if the light was then absorbed into the router, and the whole event was over within 2 seconds. The router lights are green for reference, no sound, quiet in the room except for the fan that I run at night. My first thought, of course, went to the supernatural, mostly because I'm very interested in the subject. I've been pretty much my whole life. I consider myself a rational guy, though, so I started thinking of possibilities for what had just happened. The only one that makes any sense would be car lights coming in from outside. I have a window that looks out in my cul-de-sac, and the neighbor across the street will sometimes leave early in the morning, usually between 5 and 6, though. That, of course, doesn't rule out the possibility of a car at that time. There's just one problem with that. Every time I've seen a car's lights come in through my window, for the last 4.5 years I've lived in this house, it's been on the side wall, not my ceiling. Every single time. I'm on the ground floor, and for a light to hit the angle it needed to hit on that trajectory the light took, it would have to have come from a source within 10 feet of my window, shooting from a spot on the grass right outside. The more I think about it, the more unlikely the car thing seems, especially to hit my desk in the way that it did. It's never happened before. Plus, the angle of the furniture in my room blocks a direct flash of light into my eyes from outside. I have a TV in my dresser in the way. This to me leaves the matter unexplained. My guess is that it was an entity of some sort, a sprite, an ET, alternate dimension, conscious something. Some sort of being that manifested as light in this reality. The quickness in which it all happened, I was awake and open-eyed with a flash of a second. Felt like the light had maybe messed up, gotten too close. It didn't mean to wake me up, and had to make a quick retreat. Ghost walked towards me. 1 to 2 years ago, I stayed at my parents' house. It was in the evening, and I was in my room eating. At this point, I was feeling pretty well and rested. Didn't take any kinds of drugs or, basically, you could say I had enough sleep. I finished my supper and I was leaving my room to bring the dishes to the kitchen. For this, I have to go 7 meters straight, and then turn left and go straight again. At the turn, I can go left again, and I'm at the door of the living room. The door was slightly open and the lights were on, so there is a little bit of light shining through at the end of the hallway opposite where I'm standing. As I step out of the room, I see the other side of a translucent figure standing in the light, and since it was a little bit further away, I was very confused. I could see the objects behind it, could make out how it was standing. It wasn't facing me, but the cracked door of the living room. My father sits at an angle, so that he could actually see through that cracked door right where the shadow was standing. My mother was at a desk there as well, where she could have seen that. And the posture of that shadow was pretty clearly looking at the door, but it looked just like a human. My parents were talking inside and never realized. I stood there completely confused. Then the shadow turned its head toward me, looked at me for a moment, and then it turned completely toward me and started walking. No red eyes or anything, but its movement was very clear in 3D. Well, it started walking towards me. When I think back, it was clearly a shadow figure, but in my confusion, I thought it was my brother. He was also at home and his room is next to mine. That was the only thing that made sense to me. And since the hallway is pitch black, I was waiting at my door so I don't bump into him with my dish. My door was open and my computer screen was on, so there was a little bit of light in front of me as well. It was very clearly walking toward me, and at this point it all made sense. It was my brother, but actually not. They had the same height, but that thing had no visible face, just a translucent shadow, but with all the human features. Mind you, when it locked eyes with me, it didn't look away once. I can remember my thought process pretty well. I look at the ground, and after 2 to 3 seconds, I'm thinking to myself, what's taking so long? Why is he walking so slowly? That thing wasn't even in the halfway. I look at it again and see how slowly nonchalant that it walked. Kinda walked a little bit funny, not in a supernatural way, but it used its shoulders and arms, walking like he's the shit, but still moving just like a human. I look at it annoyed, and my next thought was, why is he staring me down like that? Even though I couldn't see a face or eyes, its head was locked onto me the whole time. Like a second later, it crossed the halfway, and I kept looking at it. I was thinking, man, that hallway is really dark. I would see the whole body of the shadow completely in the pitch black. It really stood out to me even in the darkness. It's now around 2 to 3 meters away from me. And then it stepped into the screen light coming from my computer screen in my room. That's when I realized that's not my brother. Didn't move an inch, I was in shock. It stopped in front of me like 1 meter, now standing very visible in the light of my computer, its head still locked straight at me. Stopped for a moment. Then it looked like it took a small step with 1 foot, so it was standing a little bit vertically toward me. There I could see that it was completely 3D. Then it just vanished in front of my eyes, almost like when a camera loses focus. So did it look like with my eyes and the ghost was gone? I think it turned into a mist in a matter of milliseconds, but I'm really not sure. I'm in my 20s and something like that never happened to me before. From the position and the angle at the beginning, it looked and acted like it was trying to catch the attention of my father, who could see through the cracked door. And when it noticed me, it kind of looked a moment and surprised and was confused too, before it started walking toward me. Surely took its sweet time when it walked. That ghost was perfectly visible for around 7 to 10 seconds. Ghost played a prank. About a month ago, my best friend, her husband, and I stayed at a hotel in a very historic haunted area where we live. We decided it would be fun to do the Estes method with my spirit box. If you don't know what that is, it's a ghost hunting technique that you use with the spirit box. One person puts on a blindfold and noise-canceling headphones plugged into the spirit box, and you repeat only what you hear through the box while the others ask questions to the energy that you're trying to contact. We started off normal with her husband being the one with the box, asking typical questions like, "Is there anyone here with us?" We got a few responses, but nothing to blow our socks off. We did this for about 30 minutes until we let my best friend go under. This is when things got fun. Me and her husband asked if anybody here would like to speak. And immediately she said, "I'm here." We asked who, and she said, "It's Pat." Now, earlier that day, they used a crappy phone app to contact spirits and they got the name Patrick, so we assumed it may be him again. We kept asking questions and she randomly said, "I'm the one that took your phone." Earlier, when they did use the phone app, her husband lost his phone, looked everywhere toward the bed apart, and walked away to come back to it sitting right on the bed in plain sight. At this point, we're screaming and laughing like, "No way!" I make a comment saying, "Oh, he pranked us." My best friend, not being able to hear a word we're saying due to the headphones, repeats, "Yeah, it was just a prank." The Living Dinah Map. I used to work as a CNA for 4 years before I got into RN school. I would definitely say as a CNA I've encountered some pretty interesting and chilling things here. But nevertheless, nothing was comparable to what happened to me and my nurse one night during the first outbreak of COVID-19. I was working on a dementia unit in the second floor of an assisted living facility. Nothing out of the ordinary was happening during the second shift. My nurse just finished her second pass after dinner. I was doing my third round. You know, the usual, just trying to keep things on track, but we're both dressed in full PPE gear. Because like I stated in the beginning, this was during the first outbreak of COVID-19. And let me tell you, if you've ever worn PPE gear, it gets very hot, sweaty, and super uncomfortable. So before I switched to my next shift that I agreed to work, I decided to get my vitals ahead of time. You know, so I could just chill out for a bit during third shift after smashing through the second. I grabbed the Dinah map and began taking my vitals. Just for your information, this dementia unit was split up into 2 hallways. The right-hand side was the long hallway and the left-hand side was the short hall, and in the middle of the unit was the nurse station. We didn't have any windows, it just had a front counter and 2 locked doors on each side of the nurse station. It also had a front counter that had a full panoramic view of the unit floor. Anyway, to get back to the story, I was just finishing up taking my vitals. I only had 1 patient left. Her name was Mrs. Velez. Now, I've only been working this dementia unit for about 2 weeks, so I really don't know much backstory on Mrs. Velez and her backstory. Apparently, she used to be a witch doctor from Puerto Rico. She was into Santeria and witchcraft. So no matter what shift it was, everybody dreaded going into her room to take her vitals, give her food, or take her shower room, or it was always creepy to be around her, or in her room when she wasn't there. Her room was always cold, and she would always draw weird symbols all over the wall, sometimes with her own fecal matter. She was typically calm during the day, but at the switch of the first to second shift, all the way through third, she would have a mental behavior called sundowners, and boy. She was typically calm during the day, but at the switch of the first to second shift, all the way through the third shift, she would have a mental behavior called sundowners. So when this would occur, she would become very irate, aggressive, and constantly screaming and talking very loud in Spanish. It was really hard to understand her at times because she didn't have any teeth at all, so her Spanish was very slurred and sometimes inaudible. Like mine. So as I needed her room, I noticed that I was very quiet, very unusual for this time of night because of her condition, so I slowly approached her room. I left the dino map a couple rooms down from hers so I could approach her room quietly. As I got closer, I felt chills start to run up and down my spine, the little hairs on my neck stand up, and the temperature in the corner of the hallway getting very cold to the point where I could see my breath. So I kept slowly approaching until I finally got to her doorway, and it took everything in me to open her door. I slowly opened it, and to my surprise, she wasn't in the room. This left me puzzled and, to be honest, scared. Only because Mrs. Velez was infamously known during her behaviors to hide and sneak up on anybody who tried to approach her in her room. So not seeing her, I left her room, walked briskly back to the nurse station as fast as I could and as quiet as I could, but I stopped abruptly in my tracks. I noticed that the vital machine was missing, so I stood there for a second, then continued walking to the nurse's station. When I got there, I kind of let miners know that Mrs. Valet was not in her room. So that being said, my nurse got out from behind the desk, locked the nurse station, helped me look for her. Me and him were looking about maybe 10 minutes, and out of nowhere, we felt the whole unit get freezing cold. So in a quiet panic, me and him stopped what we were doing, got back to back, and started looking in all directions like a pair of sentries. As we stood there for a couple of seconds, I heard an eerie dragging of the vital machine coming down the hall, moving by itself, as if somebody was having a hard time pulling it. Me and the nurse both stared at it in disbelief. The machine started to flicker on and off as it neared us. All the notification sounds started going haywire and then immediately stopped. The machine was about 4 feet in front of us when it stopped. After it abruptly stopped in front of us, it was thrown, as if somebody grabbed it and chucked it across the room. Now, I'm going to let you know these machines weigh roughly 80 to 90 pounds, depending on the name brand. It hit the nurse's station with such force that one of the CNAs from the neighboring unit came over and asked what was going on. Oh my God. That is the most aggressive beep I've ever heard. We explained to the CNA from the neighboring unit what happened. She told us it's gotta be Mrs. Velez. So she went down with us down the hall to her room to inspect, and guess who we seen sitting Indian style in the far dark corner of the room? Mrs. Velez. So it's safe to say after working that double on the dementia unit that day, I noped the heck out of there and never worked there again. Not a sighting, but very weird still. Today I sat out in front of my house, putting Christmas decorations up. My neighbor's cat stared at me meowing. It's at this point I remembered an experience with that cat that I never posted anywhere due to the weight of the events at the time. In December 2020, my mother passed away. It was a quick, short bout with cancer. Literally within a month, she was gone. I have a feeling she hid how sick she was, put off going to the doctor. I had no idea that it could happen that quick. It was a tragedy itself, but the bigger tragedy was that she was a month out from meeting her first grandchild. That said, at the time, my girlfriend lived with me. And due to how far being into pregnant she was, we stayed upstairs at the time playing PC games or watching Netflix and chilling. The week after my mom passed, things got weird. We kept hearing stuff downstairs. Both cats were in the room with us. We were awoken by this noise. It being an old building was out of the question, as it was pretty new construction, but every time I went downstairs, there was nothing. Could it be my mom? Maybe, but things changed when I heard the noise. Ran down those stairs faster than my portly self should be able to. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw yellow eyes staring at me from the dark, claws etched into the screen of the window, nearly ripping into it. The neighbor's cat hung from it. Apparently, he was the noise. He tried leaping into the window for whatever reason, and after another week, he never did it again. He's never done it since these incidents. He's a nice cat. Just hung out with me today. Yes, Keka. I still have no idea why he bounded into the window and never did it again. I miss my mom dearly, and I'd like to imagine she stayed with us for a bit, maybe teasing that cat and tricking him into the window. I still wonder why to this day, what it was. I'm also curious if anybody's had any incidents like this. Ouija board, my chilling encounter. All of my life I've told myself that I would never do a Ouija board. However, a few nights ago after a few drinks, my friends convinced me to try it. After losing a friend to suicide last week, I tried to speak to them through the board. I asked questions that only my deceased friend would know. They were not answered correctly. I thought that the other person I was playing the board with was moving the piece. I became upset and started cursing at the spirits, calling the Ouija board a hoax. This would later prove to be a mistake. After a while of watching my friends play, I decided to be a smartass and ask if the spirits could put me to sleep because I was quite tired. I had heard similar stories of Ouija boards making people pass out. My friends agreed to ask the spirits to put me to sleep. I relaxed and allowed my body to be completely vulnerable. According to my friends, the piece on the board started to go crazy. The piece was moving incredibly fast and spelling out my name and telling me to sleep. I was out cold at this time. Although my friends claim I was sleeping, I could comprehend everything that was said. Once the board had spelled out "wake up," my eyes opened and I could see and talk, but my body was completely paralyzed. I tried my best to remain calm, but I was completely stuck. I was able to talk to my friends and tell them what was going on, but they didn't believe me. Their minds did in fact change after another guy came up and hit me in the man parts. I didn't flinch, and that was the point that everybody believed what was really going on. I wanted out of the state I was in. So incredibly bad, I was terrified. My friends went back to the board and tried to have the spirits put me back to normal. In the process, I was snapped in and out of being able to talk and not. At one point, I started crying. I have no idea why I was crying, but it just happened. I didn't have any control over my own emotions. After the crying became uncontrollable, creepy laughter along with very strange, stiff movements of my limbs followed. At this point, it was clear to me that I no longer had control over my own body or actions. I tried my best to fight whatever force had control over me, but I just couldn't. It all came to an end when a voice inside of my head kept repeating, "Follow the light." Then shortly after someone in the room turned on the light switch, I simply snapped out of it. I woke up with pure joy, thankful to be out of the state that I was in. I jumped into my friend's arms with the joy of having control over my body again. In the aftermath of that fateful night, the encounter with the Ouija board became an indelible chapter in my life. The skepticism I once held transformed into a profound awareness of the mysterious forces that can transcend our understanding. The struggle for control over my own body, the unsettling commands, and the eventual release after. Following this enigmatic directive left an imprint on my consciousness. This experience compelled me to acknowledge the existence of unseen dimensions, urging me to approach the spiritual world with newfound respect and caution. As I reflect on that fall night, I carry with me not just a story, but a profound lesson about the complexities of the supernatural and a delicate balance between curiosity and the potential dangers that lie beyond the veil. Most terrifying ghost I've ever had. When I was staying with a friend, there was a lot of paranormal activity happening in her house. Things would knock over and break when they weren't even close to the edge. Doors would fly open when it wasn't windy. Windows and other glass things would shatter randomly. Doors would lock themselves. Things would go missing and never come back. We would see a figure in the yard and it would disappear behind a tree and never come back out on the other side. We would hear things, whispers and voices, and even things would fly off shelves and hit me in the face while I was sleeping. I remember it was Friday the 13th, and I felt a very bad vibe in the house that day. I went to go take a shower. This shower was big and had a mirror in it. I'm taking a shower and I feel stinging and burning on my back and shoulder blades. I panic looking in the mirror with my back facing it. I got this feeling of pure terror. When I looked into the mirror, seeing a woman with long black hair who was very pale and had a white dress on, I screamed looking toward the wall where she was standing. Nothing, I see nothing. I got out of the shower frantically, wrapping the towel around myself, only to turn around to get out of the bathroom and see this woman again. But her eyes were gone. She was bleeding from her eye sockets. Her eyes were literally gone. She ran toward me at full speed and curled up into a ball on the floor. My friend came in to find me crying on the bathroom floor. She went to comfort me only to find I had deep scratch marks on my back and shoulder blades. I left that trip 3 days early. No fucking way I'm ever going back to that house. Dog/house sitting haunt. My sister was house/dog sitting for one of my old clients. That week I had to get my car serviced in the city. I lived in a different city like 30 miles away. My sister and I worked together. We decided to drop off my car and I would stay with her. We can go to work together. The house she was sitting always gave me creepy vibes. Even when I would be there alone, it has this weird foyer that makes it feel like someone's on the top just watching you. The guest bedroom was upstairs where the foyer was. I would sleep on the couch because it gave me heebie-jeebies. It just always kind of was a weird feeling in this house. It's built on an old town in California. This day we were downstairs. There's a kitchen, living room, and the foyer thing is by the front door, but still kind of peeks over above us. Yep, this house is huge and beautiful. We hung out downstairs, made food, and ultimately ended up falling asleep on the couch. My sister slept on one side, I slept on the L part of the couch. Basically, I couldn't see her sleeping unless I propped my body up to look. It was our early day for work. We had to be at the office by 7 or 7:15. Of course, meaning that we had to wake up pretty early. My alarm didn't go off yet, and I heard so much commotion in the kitchen, right behind the couch. The sink turning on and off and pots and pans clattering almost as if someone was cleaning the kitchen. I was thinking my sister had gotten up before me to feed the dog and give herself some more time to get ready. I was half asleep. I didn't say anything because I'm a firm believer of getting every minute and second of sleep until my alarm goes off. I fell back asleep and told myself that my alarm would wake me up. I didn't check my phone the first time I woke up, so I don't know how much time had passed, but I was awakened by my sister's alarm set 20 or 30 minutes before mine so she could feed the dog. When I heard her alarm and saw her waking up, I immediately woke up because in my mind she was already awake and making noises in the kitchen. Turns out, she was never awake and in the kitchen for the first time when I woke up. I asked her if she woke up earlier and did anything in the kitchen, and of course she says no. To this day, it freaks me out. I almost wish I got up and turned around to see what was going on, but I'm also terrified of seeing anything. Unless the old dog got in the mood to clean the kitchen. I have no idea who that was. Heebie-jeebies confirmed. When I was a teen, I had a visit from a ghost. I'm a 47-year-old female. When I was 15, I had a visit from a ghost. I was home alone with my mom. She went to the convenience store about a mile down the road. My dad was at work, and younger brother was out with friends. I was in my bedroom with the door open reading a book. My mom was gone maybe half an hour. While she was gone, I heard a female voice call my name. I thought she had gotten back and called me, so I asked what she wanted. The voice called my name again, and I asked again what she wanted. I then realized my mom had gone to the store, so I got up to look out the window to see if the car was in the driveway. It wasn't. As I'm looking out the window, I hear my name again. At this point, I'm freaking out. The layout of the house. When entering the house, you walk into the dining room and you go to the left and down the hall and you come into my room. Then my brother's room. Parents' room is across the hall from my room. If going to the right, you enter the kitchen, which is in the center of the house. Next to the kitchen was what we called the Florida room, and beyond the kitchen was the den. Now, as I'm freaking out, I hear my name again as I realize I'm alone. I slowly walked to the kitchen looking around to see if anybody was home other than me, but I was alone. I walked in the kitchen. Standing in the den was a young female teenager, dressed in what I would guess was 50s clothes. She was a solid form, long brown hair, white blouse, dress pants, and saddle shoes. I'm standing in the kitchen in shock, freaking out. She said my name once more and then faded away in front of me. All I could do was stand there. 5 minutes later, my mom pulled into the driveway. I never saw her again. That's the end of tonight's stories. Let me know if you like this new microphone setup more than the last microphone. As the narrator, I'm simply curious. It's not that I want to block out the cows or I want to block out the geckos. I actually like those guys. The human noise is what bothers me more, so I'm trying this mic. See you tomorrow night. Bye-bye. Can infrared beams like the ones from IR guns trigger music boxes and other devices? Just got me thinking. I have an IR temperature gun I use for my reptiles. Has a pretty long range, several hundred meters, and it has an invisibility setting, so you can either have it set to make a visible laser or have none visible but it'll still take temperature readings. Plus the one I got at least has a silent setting so it doesn't make any sound after getting a reading. Though I'm not willing to spend the money on buying REM pods or EMF or music boxes, etc. to see if the laser can set it off or not. How it works from my understanding, please correct me if you know that I'm wrong with any points. When you hold the trigger, it sends out a wider beam of infrared radiation and a narrower laser. The laser is to make it easier to target, though the other beam gets wider and further away it is. When it hits a surface, it then detects how much infrared radiation is radiated back into the beam, funnels it, and then uses that to work out the temperature. With my one, if you hold it down but aimed at one spot, the reading will stay the same. But if you move it around, the temperature reading will change if the surface has different temperatures at different spots as you move to another surface. Although, if all the spots you move it around has the same temperature, the reading won't change. The reason I pointed out, it's not like it's sending a single burst of IR, but instead sending a continuous beam as long as the trigger's held down. So rather than shooting like a gun, it's more like you're activating a rubbish lightsaber, you could say. The beam only stops if you let go of the trigger, in which case it then locks in the last temperature reading that it got. Mine beeps when you let it go to signify that you got a locked-in reading, but also has a silent mode. Plus, it does have a visible laser setting to make it easier to aim, but this can be turned off. So, still takes the temperature as it's beaming the IR, but doesn't have the visible laser to know exactly where you're aiming. That said, still easy to use without the visible laser as it's shot in a straight line. So, just like lining up a shot with a gun or a bow, but not having to take into consideration the projectile dropping over distances. That was not very paranormal.